Good evening, everyone. Tonight we celebrate Maunday, Thursday. We celebrate the Last Supper. We celebrate the great command that Jesus gave to us all, to love one another as He loves us. Our reading for this night comes from John, the 13th chapter. It was just before the Passover feast. Jesus knew the time had come for Him to leave this world and go to the Father. Having loved His own who were in the world, He showed them the full extent of His love. The evening meal was being served, and the devil had already prompted Judas Iscariot, son of Simon, to betray Jesus. Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under His power, and that He had come from God and He was returning to God. So He got up from the meal, took off His outer clothing, and wrapped a towel around His waist. After that He poured water into a basin and began to wash His disciples' feet, drying them with the towel that was wrapped around Him. He came to Simon Peter, who said to Him, "Lord, are you going to wash my feet?" Jesus replied, "You do not know what I am doing, but later you will understand." "No," said Peter, "you shall never wash my feet." Jesus said to him, "Unless I wash you, you have no part with me." "Then, Lord," Peter replied, "not just my feet, but my hands and my head as well." Jesus answered, "A person who has had a bath needs only to wash his feet. His whole body is clean, and you are clean, though not every one of you." For Jesus knew who was going to betray Him, and that's why He said not everyone was clean. When He had finished washing their feet, He put on His clothes and returned to His place. "Do you understand what I have done for you?" Jesus asked them. "You call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, for that is what I am. Now that I, your Lord and your teacher, have washed your feet, you should also wash one another's feet. I have set an example that you should do as I have done for you. I tell you the truth, no servant is greater than his master, nor messenger greater than the one who sent him. Now that you know these things, you will be blessed to do them. Now is the Son of Man glorified, and God is glorified in Him. If God is glorified in Him, God will glorify the Son in Himself, and will glorify Him at once. My children, I'll be with you only a little longer. You will look for me, and just as I told the Jews, so I tell you now, where I am going, you cannot come. A new command I give you. Love one another, as I have loved you. So you must love one another. By this all men will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another." There's a story that during the American Revolution, a rider came by in civilian clothes and passed by these men who were putting up a defensive barrier. These were Revolutionary War soldiers. And the rider noticed that the man in charge of the men putting together a defensive barrier wasn't helping them. He was just shouting orders. And the rider questioned this, and the man in charge replied to the rider, "Sir, I'm a corporal." Now, the rider dismounted his horse and then proceeded to help the soldiers put together a defensive barrier. The rider turned to the corporal and said, "Mr. Corporal, next time you have a job like this and don't have enough men to do it, go to your commander-in-chief, and I will help you again." The rider in civilian clothes was none other than George Washington. Tonight, Jesus sets an example on how we are to be as Christians, how we are to serve, how we are to love, an ultimate love, a great love just like Jesus. For this Maunday, Thursday, we remember well the Last Supper. We remember well what Jesus instituted, His great command, and know that Jesus goes to the cross on Friday for our salvation. I want you to think about that night, the night of the Last Supper, as The disciples and Jesus joined together in the Passover meal, a meal that they celebrated yearly, a meal that commemorated their ancestors, of course, fleeing from slavery in Egypt, freeing from bondage. They joined together a meal they had done throughout their lives. I want you to think about Jesus and all that was going on through Jesus' mind, all that he knew, because Jesus knew full well that in less than 24 hours he would die on the cross. Think about that. What would you do if you knew in less than 24 hours you would die a horrible death? What would you do? Would you spend time with friends and family? Would you write down some memoirs? Would you go and pray? Now Jesus, knowing his time is short, decides to teach. Decides to teach important lessons to the disciples, important commandments they need to have to know what it is to be truly his followers. Jesus, indeed, this night teaches much. And I encourage you that after you see this, that you go and read the rest of the Gospel of John and what happened at the Last Supper. Read chapter 14 and following, and see all that Jesus taught. See what he wants the disciples to know, what he prays for, before Jesus goes to the Garden of Gethsemane and then is arrested. At the Last Supper, Jesus wanted to show humility. He wanted to model that for the disciples. And that is why he does something so simple, yet so meaningful, as foot washing for the 12. It's something that the 12 disciples would have never expected, because washing feet was a job for somebody of low standing, a job for a servant, or a job for someone who really loved and cared. Now, foot washing, of course, is a necessity in the time of Jesus. People walked everywhere, and majority of the roads were just dirt roads. And since people wore open sandals, their feet got really dusty and dirty. Can you imagine that? Walking around everywhere, getting dusty, dirty feet. Imagine how your feet would be, walking miles along roads. So foot washing was a necessity that had to be done. Jesus, to model humility, to model how disciples would be, decides to wash the disciples' feet, to show how much love and care he has for them, and the love and care that they should have for others. Jesus gives an example of a servant leader, a leader that shows by example how to be, a leader that loves, not a leader that lords power over people, not a leader that smacks people around, not a leader that tries to humiliate or just be mean. No, Jesus is a leader that loves. And this is a model for us who have all kinds of positions and power in our lives. We are to be a people of love. Our task is to do this and be just like Jesus, to go beyond our prejudices and our desires, those very human ideals of what a person is to be worthy of love, how they look, if they're related to us, what country or tribe they come from. No, our challenge is to go beyond that. Go beyond those ways, the ways our society tells us to love, and love greatly like Jesus. Mother Teresa was in Phoenix, Arizona in 1989. And there she was being interviewed by radio station KTAR, which is the largest radio station in Phoenix, Arizona. Now, in a private moment, the announcer had asked Mother Teresa what he could do for her. And if, of course, it was an offer of just he could do anything for her. Now, his thought was that Mother Teresa would, of course, ask to, for him to make a special announcement about supporting the Home for the Poor that she came into Arizona to dedicate. Or just kind of put another message out, or maybe even him personally donate to this House for the Poor. Now, as he is expecting those kind of answers from her, Mother Teresa said to him, "Yes, there is. Find somebody nobody loves and love them. You are called to love. You are called to be a person loved, because that's what identifies you as a follower of Jesus. Love at the deepest level. Love going lower than your station in life. Just have the greatest love. What ways right now do you show love in your life? What ways do you care for others? What ways do you express it with your words and your deeds? How do you show that great love of Jesus? And do you show it in all humility? A humility like Jesus washing the feet of the disciples. Humility that does anything, jumps right in there when something needs to be done. Dave Thomas, the founder of Wendy's hamburger chain, was known for his humble service within a multi-billion-dollar empire that he founded. When asked what made him so successful, Dave Thomas would reply, "My MBA." Now, he wasn't talking about his business degree. He's instead talking about his mop and bucket attitude. He would say, "A mop and bucket attitude means there's no task too insignificant to tackle and nothing to stop me from jumping in and doing what needs to be done." In all humility, Jesus teaches us to act and live loving others just like Jesus. We do anything for others. Jesus commands us to love. His love drives us this night. It shows to live beyond the foolish ideas of love that we have as people. A love that is true. A true and great love, just like Jesus. Jesus, who will go to the cross and suffer and die for sinners. Jesus, who does anything so we may have salvation. Jesus, who pays the debts on the cross that are not his own. He does this because he loves you. Recognize that love. Live in that love. And be like Jesus. Amen.